he's shooting his own corporations in the foot. That's why you're going to see the stock market is just crazy. It's really, I'm flabbergasted that someone would be the CEO of a G7 country and behave in such a way in both countries. One, for throwing out ideas like this without really checking. And he keeps changing his mind too. 1 minute it's going to be 10% and this. So the Canadian dollar looks like a cardiogram of a guy having a heart attack. That's how it's looked all week.
Hello, you're watching The Trump Report with me, Louis Sykes. This time we're joined by Diane Francis, a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council in Washington. She's the editor-at-large with the National Post newspaper and has a best-selling Substack with regular updates on geopolitics and the United States. Diane, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start with your reaction to Trump's press conference yesterday following the DC plane crash. In terms of how a US president reacts to tragedies, this is quite a break from tradition, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, Trump is a break from any tradition. Even as a businessman, he was a break from tradition. He's a one-off, I hope. The point is that, instead of doing the usual, now he did call for a minute's silence, and then he described what happened. But it was frighteningly rambling, and he repeated himself constantly. I thought to me, it looked like cognitive decline, actually, to be honest with you. And then, of course, there was the failure he was empathetic, but to a point, and then took facts and twisted them into a conspiracy theory. The guy doesn't think straight, and, that's kind of worrisome.
And do you think America is prepared for 4 more years of this? Is Trump?
Nobody is prepared for this. I'm talking to you tonight, and it's January 31st. It's 4:00 Eastern time. The markets have just closed for the week, just in advance of new tariffs of 25% about to descend on Canada and Mexico. And the stock markets have been crashing, along with the Canadian dollar value. This is going to be a horrific problem. And we're looking at a loss of 1 million or more jobs, a downturn in growth. And our central banker has said that this will have devastating consequences. We could be plunged into a recession as a country, and the same thing will happen to Mexico. This is very reckless, this kind of thing. And the reason that it's interesting also that the American markets are crashing too, because American corporations are very heavily involved in both Canada and Mexico in the bilateral trading relationship. So you have American-owned car companies with branch plant factories in Canada and Mexico, and they're going to take a hit because their profits are going to be reduced by the tariffs. And they're going to take a hit because tariffs mean higher prices for consumers. So they're going to sell fewer cars. I mean, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot because of the integration between all three countries. But in Canada, it's huge. About half of all the foreign investment in Canada is American.
And is there room here for negotiations still before these tariffs fully come into effect? Or are America and Canada really in for the ride on this now?
Well, yes and no. Now, here's the problem. America may have a less than functioning presidency, but Canada has no prime minister. And we had a problem with these tariffs being announced. And our prime minister, Justin Trudeau, went down to Mar-a-Lago. With the threat of the tariffs, it was time to talk Turkey and to negotiate. And what do you need? And what can we do? And, it's going to be horrible for both of us and blah, blah, blah. And instead he came back and, Trump made the slur that Canada should become a 51st state if it can't take 25% tariffs. And he quit. We don't have a prime minister. Not only that, but he prorogued Parliament. We have no Parliament. We have no election to replace him. We have no one in place to succeed him. So we are a ship without a captain. Who does that? I mean, this is so reckless and irresponsible. And so here we are, Canadians on a boat, a mature democracy with a great economy, great trading relationship. And not only have we been mugged by Donald Trump with a surprise 25% tariff without any notice, really, but we don't have a ship, we don't have a captain to negotiate. We're the worst of all possible worlds. So this is really, Canadians are beyond upset. And Canadians don't get emotional, but they're emotional.
Canada's opposition leader, Peter Poilievre, has said that the US would be hit hard over these tariffs. Is a harder line helpful at the moment?
It doesn't really matter. What really matters is that we have a leader, which we don't have now. Polyev would be fine. But if Trudeau hadn't wimped out on us and just left us high and dry in the middle of a crisis, maybe the worst crisis in my lifetime facing Canada, we could talk about these things. Yes, we're going to have to do some retaliation, but we can't do a lot. And the other thing is that Mr. Trump is going to be going to school on this, because what he doesn't realize is that he needs oil from Canada more than he thinks. And if he puts tariffs or he fools around with the oil supply, he's going to have a catastrophic increase at the gasoline pumps. And that's going to hurt him politically, and that's going to hurt inflation. And the second thing he's going to realize, which he obviously doesn't, is that most of the trade between Canada to the US is from the branch plants owned by American companies in Canada shipping their stuff back home. So he's shooting his own corporations in the foot. That's why you're going to see the stock market is just crazy. It's really, I can't, I'm flabbergasted that someone would be the CEO of a G7 country and behave in such a way in both countries. One, for throwing out ideas like this without really checking. And he keeps changing his mind too. 1 minute it's going to be 10% and this. So the Canadian dollar looks like a cardiogram of a guy having a heart attack. That's how it's looked all week. And, and then we have this awful man, Justin Trudeau, who should never have been elected in the first place. He's a moron, quit in the middle of this. So, we're at sea on this. This is awful.
I don't believe Trump has his trade secretary in place yet. Is there anyone that has responsibility for dealing with the fallout for this who is in place and can act quickly to do anything about this on the American or Canadian side?
Yeah, they don't have a trade guy, but they have trading experts. And the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, who's from Wall Street, very astute, he gets it. And I think he's a good force inside that Trump team. And, he sort of has said things like, but they keep giving us messages and the market's going crazy. So, for instance, it's 25%. Oh, yeah. Then it's not oil. Then it's, well, we haven't made up our minds yet. Give us another 8 hours. And then Lutnick comes out and says, hey, you get rid of the fentanyl and the illegal migrants and there'll be no tariffs on Canada. So this can make you crazy. And this is I don't know if this is intentional for negotiation purposes to get us into such a panic that we'll agree to almost anything compliantly. But again, we don't have a parliament to approve anything, and we don't have a prime minister. I think this is unprecedented.
And as you say, Canada, in a way, asleep at the wheel. Trump's tariffs possibly backfiring on America itself. Do we know much about where this situation leaves Mexico?
Well, Mexico has a different situation. First of all, Mexico's border is a mess, and it always has been. And it's fentanyl pouring across the border. And the cartels, who he's now declared are terrorist organizations, which is a good thing, are responsible for all of this. And let's not forget, there's a lot of money being made by Americans inside America that has encouraged all this illegal migration. These people come in, they work for peanuts, they get paid cash under the table, they don't pay taxes, they live like animals. It's awful, many of them. And, they're desperate. And then the drug business is enormous business in the United States. The cartels and the drug dealers in the US are making a fortune on fentanyl. And, this isn't right. But what I'm saying is that they have to clean up their drug problem, their drug demand problem as well. But Mexico is a far, far more serious situation. And Canada, yes, we do have leaky borders because we have a big, long border. But in Mexico, it's a frontier. It's the Wild West, And last year in Mexico, 60,000 murders committed. It's a war zone. Mexico's a war zone. And that's what people don't realize. And it's because of the cartels who really control the country. So I really feel sorry for Mexico. And if they don't curb the cartels and do as Trump rightly demands and stop this, Mexico's ended up. I think there could be an invasion by the United States in Mexico to clean it up. I really believe that. I think that's possible. So we've got a real problem in this continent.
Well, Trump has also promised to hit China with 10% tariffs. It's not 100% clear when those might come in. Uh, the Chinese presumably are going to be looking at what's going on with Canada and Mexico and the US markets with more than a little bit of trepidation.
Well, yeah, the 10% with China is mentioned in concert with Mexico and Canada because the fentanyl ingredients are coming from China. So he's smacking them with a 10% just for making the ingredients for fentanyl and shipping them to Canada and the US and to Mexico. Okay, so that's one thing. But China's in for much more. He's talking about 60% on everything. But right now they're getting hit with 10% because they're feeding the Mexican and the Canadian drug dealers. So he's hitting us with 25% each and he's hitting them with 10%, and then they're going to get another 50 or 60%.
And is there any sign at the moment that China are willing to acquiesce at all to Trump's demands?
Well, they said they would stop the trafficking of the ingredients to Biden. They promised that, and they didn't. I don't know if they can. I mean, trade is tricky. I mean, you can smuggle anybody or anything anywhere in the world at any time, and we know that. Britain has a problem. Everybody does. But I'm not saying that that makes it right. But the point is that Trump has declared geoeconomic war against everybody, and this is his weapon. It's tariffs, and Europe is going to get it 20 to 30%. He's threatened to give 20 or 30% tariffs on Europe. And that's the same level of magnitude that we're facing. But I'm telling you, we're going to be the shall we say, what do you say, the experiment. And I think it's going to be pretty shocking what he's going to do to our country, and people are very angry.
Well, perhaps one of the first blows of a sort of trade war between China, or competition between Trump's America and China. It was the launch of China's DeepSeek, which marks what you and others have called AI's Sputnik moment, as noted in your Substack article. Why is this so significant, and where does it leave Trump's Stargate AI program?
Well, it was as I mentioned in my newsletter. In a matter of a couple of days, we had Trump announcing with a bunch of tech guys from Silicon Valley a $500 billion Stargate deal to develop data centers and energy sources to take the lead in the AI race, the artificial intelligence race. Shortly after that, then China, not China, but the company in China announced that they'd come up with AI product that was as good, if not better, and using a fraction of the energy that the American version required, which is very important for climate purposes and everything else and cost. That created $1 trillion market correction. So you had a $500 billion deal announced, then you had $1 trillion market correction, and the whole thing is just crazy. But it would appear now, it could be a fake, who knows, but I don't think so. And another company in China, a big company, announced they have one even better. So we'll see how it is. But it looks like they've taken a lead. Now, the Sputnik reference for our audience, I assume they all remember, but you're too young, Louis. You were probably not born in 57, but in 1957, after the Second World War, the U.S. and Russia were in a race to put a man up in space, and they beat us. And they shot up something called Sputnik, and the Sputnik moment absolutely terrified and shocked America into putting gazillions of dollars into their space program. And of course, they weren't overtaken for long. And now they are superior in the space race. But this AI business is equally much more important, actually. And to think that the Chinese could have, and this company was a startup, and it was just young engineers who just figured out a better way to do things. And for $6 million, they beat billions of dollars that were spent by Silicon Valley tech companies, and they've taken a bit of a lead. And so, it's going to be very interesting to watch it, but it's a shocker.
And Trump's own Stargate AI program already had a rocky start. His supposed ally Elon Musk clashed with Sam Altman, leader on AI in the US. Should Trump be concerned about this spat between his kind of two big guys on tech?
Well, yeah, it was funny. He was asked about that because the guy with the Stargate is named Sam Altman, and he started the company we all know of as Chat GPT. I think we've all tried it. It's amazing. Elon Musk was a partner in Chat GPT a million years ago. They fell out, so he doesn't own any of it. And of course, there's bad blood. And so he accused them of making this announcement without having any money in place. It's a very serious accusation of fraud. Trump was asked about this, and he poo pooed it. And what he said was, what? It just means Elon hates Sam Altman. I hate a lot of guys. What's the big deal? That was his attitude. And I don't think he was lying. These guys, my God, this is like Australian rules soccer. This is wild. These guys are brutes.
Well, either way, you write that Trump seems convinced by Sam Altman's call for an AI arms race. And it seems as well that Trump's energy plans, well, would have supported this objective. Is there still an energy emergency, as Trump calls it in the US, if China can produce this much less energy hungry AI?
No, there isn't. If using the prototype that they have, the Sam Altman American version, the Americans are going to have to double the amount of electricity they have available in a generation or so. If they don't have to do that, that's great. That's great for everybody. And by the way, this stuff is not really proprietary. I mean, they're going to crack the code. They're going to find out how to do it. It's just a temporary embarrassment and maybe a bit of a sprint ahead. But there's another underlying issue here, and I referenced it in my Substack. Um, a lot of people are not aware. China has baked into its political system a whole coterie of scientific mathematical geniuses who are pushing all the time. And also, they've done a much better job of educating young people. So, the number of people graduating in mathematics in China alone is more than all the graduates of universities in the United States every year. Every year, they're churning out these computer scientists because they do know the importance of having tech. And their political system has this lobby pushing hard for it. They have great universities, and it was just amazing that six young engineers with no experience were hired by a hedge fund guy who was one of these mathematical geniuses, 40 years old, $6 million in a year. They can beat Silicon Valley at AI. I mean, wow. So, hopefully these things will be shared and it'll benefit everybody. But China is to be reckoned with, no question.
And Trump's answer on, how to get AI booming in the US seems to largely be deregulate. But how far is that useful? And perhaps more importantly, how far is it safe when it comes to developing AI and other tech in America?
Well, this is the great big problem, and this is the reason why hopefully the West does win the AI race. Because if China does and they beat the AI race, we're going to be ending up with AIs, robots, drones, whatever you want to call them. We're going to end up with AIs with no ethics and no morality, and that's pretty scary stuff. That's autonomous weaponry, all of that scary stuff. Whereas if we have Western made, at least there'll be that kind of ethical requirement baked into what you can and can't do. And the problem is, though, they haven't done much already in AI, and we know what they did with social media. I mean, that's cowboy capitalism. Social media has created a lot of problems in society. Depression in teenagers, all kinds of crime. And there were no guardrails on that thing, and no liability required of companies. So the dereg thing to me will guarantee that the AI developed even in the West might be as bad as any AI developed by a totalitarian country.
And the ultimate irony, perhaps, of the Sputnik moment for AI is that if President Biden hadn't banned the export of chips crucial for developing AI, China would likely still be reliant on US products and chips to create its AI systems. How does that bode for President Trump's highly protectionist policies?
Well, it didn't work. They did a workaround. I think they found loopholes, but they did use American chips to make their system. They just came up with shortcuts and a better system. So it means that it's just sheer brain power and not necessarily something you can patent. I think you can copy that. That's what I'm told. They also did it on an open source basis, so anybody can have at it and look at it and improve it or whatever. So, it doesn't mean, oh my goodness, we're going to be controlled by them in no time. It doesn't mean that at all. And especially since this embarrassment is going to, absolutely like Sputnik did, with the Russians putting someone in space first, really get the Americans' juices flowing, and they will spend trillions of dollars to make sure they're first.
And certainly Trump seemed to react with trying to brush this off. He didn't seem too worried necessarily about this. In fact, he suggested it was a positive that the Chinese had come up with this easier, cheaper version of AI. Do you think that's real? Do you think that's how he really feels? Or do you think he's maybe trying to hide the fact that this is quite an embarrassment for him?
Well, it was uncharacteristically gracious. So, that it bugged him. But, whoever advised him that morning said, we must be gracious about this because we don't want to cast aspersions and our guys might want to do joint ventures. And, you know, uh, let's not, let's just be gracious about it. And, what he said was actually quite honest and fair. He said, this is great. And look, America stood on the shoulders of uh, uh, the Sputnik achievement to get their people in space too, and that's the fact. So we stand on each other's shoulders as we go forward, and hopefully we'll have some kind of global control.
As you note as well in your article, one area China has pulled ahead in is mining and producing the materials needed to build this AI tech. In turning against global trade in a way, is Trump actually ignoring a bigger emergency than energy? The fact that the US could be behind on the resources needed to keep up with China.
Louis, I couldn't be happier that you raised that point. One of the countries that has the greatest storehouse of critical and strategic metals and minerals untapped is Canada, and this is the company he's mugging. Okay, I mean, this is nuts. And it why hasn't Canada done it? Because Canada is a small economy, small population, which is why we've had so much American investment build the country. And so we rely on American and European and other kinds of investments to do these mining ventures. They're very expensive because they're mostly in the Arctic or in the subarctic, which is absolutely inhospitable and has no roads and that sort of thing. So this is where Canada is one of the, and Ukraine and Canada are treasure storehouses of these critical metals and minerals and strategic stuff. And so, I've raised that a lot. I was in the mining business. I've covered it, and so it can be caught up with very quickly. But he can't go around mugging a country 1 minute and then expecting to help them exploit their critical minerals.
Is there a sign that Trump recognizes this, that this sort of ace up the sleeve, perhaps, that Canada could use to negotiate their way out of the tariff situation?
No, I think he's just playing the game. We're bigger than you. We're going to hit you. Now, what are you going to pay me not to hit you? It's like the guy in the schoolyard, right? The bully. And so, what are you going to pay me? And so we have to come up, and that's where negotiations start. Europeans are going to have to come up with the same thing. We're going to have to double our military, meet the NATO commitments. That's number one for everybody, Europe and Canada. And then we're going to have to procure all the military weapons and equipment from the Americans to improve the trade balance. That's one of the games. And so, as far as the nuances of the mining industry and where the critical metals and minerals are, this guy doesn't know a lot of stuff. He doesn't read. He's not very well educated. He's smart as anything. Don't get me wrong, but he doesn't understand these nuances, and so this is something that he has to be told, and that's what Canada has to do, and I'm sure they are. We have a very good provincial premier in Alberta. I don't know if your audience is aware of the provinces in Canada, but Alberta is above Montana, and Alberta is the Saudi Arabia of the Western Hemisphere. Alberta has more oil, contrary to what Trump has said, more oil than the Americans do. One province. And it's up to 4 million barrels a day now going into the United States, and gas, and we have uranium all over the place and all kinds of stuff they need. So these are the kinds of things that are being discussed or should be in the back rooms if we had a leader.
Well, a lot of major developments we've discussed there in week 2 of Trump's presidency. More to come, I'm sure, and we'll be back with you again to discuss them, I'm certain. Thank you very much for coming on today, Diane Francis.
You're welcome, Louis, anytime.